Although the Civil War was about many different ideas and rights, there is a main concept of African American injustice to fight in the Civil War. There were many battles to be fought for the rights of African Americans, and one of these battles was the Second Battle of Fort Wagner.
July 10, 1863, General Quincy Gilmore landed his soldiers on the southeastern side of Morris Island in South Carolina.
In this battle, there was much destruction. First, we need to understand what events had happened before this great battle.
Stop. In 1861, the U.S. banned recruitment of African American soldiers to fight in the Civil War, but many African Americans wanted to fight for their rights and looked for a department that allowed blacks to join as enlisted men but not officers. The issues of slaves being freed and blacks joining the military were tangled from the commencement of the Civil War. News from Fort Sumter set off a rush by black men to enlist in the U.S. military units. They were rejected, though, because a federal law dating back to 1792 excluded African Americans from bearing arms for the U.S. Army. In Boston, many disappointed would-be volunteers met and passed a motion asking that the government modify its laws to authorize their enlistment.
The Lincoln Organization wrestled with the idea of approving the recruitment of African American troops, concerned that such a move would prompt the border states to break away. When General John C. Fremont in Missouri and General David Hunter in South Carolina issued proclamations that liberated slaves in their military regions and allowed them to enlist, their masters firmly withdrew from their orders. By the middle of 1862, however, the escalating number of former slaves, the declining amount of white volunteers, and the increasingly pressing personnel needs of the Union Army pushed the government into reconsidering the ban.
As a result, on July 17, 1862, Congress passed the Second Confiscation and Militia Act, freeing slaves who had masters in the Confederate Army. 2 days later, slavery was put to an end in the territories of the United States, and on July 22nd, President Lincoln presented the beginning draft of the Emancipation Proclamation to his advisors. After this, volunteers from South Carolina, Massachusetts, and Tennessee had filled the first African American regiments. Frederick Douglass, who participated in the freeing of the slaves in the United States, requested for recruits along with his sons Charles and Lewis Douglass. These recruits relinquished their pay from the U.S. Army when they found out that they would be paid less than that of the white soldiers. Recruitment was sluggish until Frederick Douglass, a black leader, encouraged African Americans to volunteer and fight for their rights. Because African Americans were singled out, they were not used in battles as comprehensively as they might have been, but in spite of this, many blacks were known for battles they had fought in.
As it was discussed earlier, one of these great battles was the Second Battle of Fort Wagner. This assault was led by a brigade identified as the 54th Massachusetts Regiment, composed entirely of African Americans. These soldiers were known for negotiating their pay from the U.S. Army to be equal to the white soldier's salary. Although the risk of military death was probable, this group had made the choice to lead the rest of the regiments into battle and to fight until the end. When Quincy Gilmore was appointed to operate the whole mission of assaulting Fort Wagner, his plan was to place heavy rifle guns on Cummings Point that would in turn eliminate the Confederate stronghold at nearby Fort Sumter. Once Sumter was reduced, the Army and the Navy could move swiftly to capture Charleston, the birthplace of the rebellion. On July 18, 1863, the 54th Massachusetts Regiment prepared to attack Fort Wagner. At sunset, Robert Shaw congregated 600 of his men and many other regiments from New York, Indiana, and Ohio. on a slim strip of sand just outside Fort Wagner's reinforced walls. "I want you to prove yourselves," he said. "The eyes of thousands will look on what you do tonight."
For hours, this small army marched along the beach until reaching the Confederate-packed stronghold known as Fort Wagner. When they arrived at the fort, there was immediate fire, and the regiments were speedily split up and filled with confusion. Slowly making their way over the 30-foot-tall earthen walls, the 54th and other regiments were determined to scale the walls and engage in combat with their enemy.
Finally descending inside the walls, a bloody hand-to-hand clash had begun with the Confederate and Union soldiers. Colonel Shaw, shouting, onward boys," was quickly silenced when a line of bullets struck Shaw and a few others, leaving them dead on the soft sand. By this time, other regiments such as the 6th Connecticut, 48th New York, 3rd New Hampshire, 9th Maine, and many others pressed hard against the Confederates. To show their hatred and disrespect for the 54th, the Confederates dumped all of their bodies in a ditch. The Confederates had expected that this would be such an insult that white officers would no longer be willing to fight with the African American troops. But it was the exact opposite. Shaw's parents replied that there could be no holier place to be buried than surrounded by such brave and devoted soldiers.
The 54th may have lost this great battle, but there was much damage that they accomplished. Soon afterward, the Confederate troops were forced to abandon the fort because many dead bodies had sunk in the surrounding waters and made the conditions at Fort Wagner to be unbearable. In the next 2 years, the surviving troops in the 54th Massachusetts participated in a series of successful siege operations in South Carolina, Georgia, and Florida. The 54th Massachusetts returned to Boston in September 1865. African Americans had a chance at the Battle of Fort Wagner to prove their bravery and that they, despite the risks, would fight bravely if only given the chance. Numerous amounts of African Americans felt that it was their responsibility to stand up for what they believed and fight for it, one of which was William H. Carney, who was awarded the Medal of Honor for his bravery in the Second Battle of Fort Wagner, and Frederick Douglass's sons, Lewis and Charles, also fought courageously. This battle helped change history because the war which the battle was in was against slavery, and the side against slavery prevailed and forced the South to free the slaves. This conflict was the 4th time that proved that African Americans could fight as well as the whites, and helped people to see that the black people deserved a chance to fight in the war for their country.
This video, narrated by Shelby Foote, explains what soldiers in the Civil War had gone through and how one day Union soldiers and Confederates will agree with one another and work as equals.
Reliving the war in words, he began to wish he could relive it in fact. And he came to believe that he and his fellow soldiers, gray and blue, might one day be able to do just that, if not here on earth, then afterwards in Valhalla. Who knows, he asked as his narrative drew toward its close, but it may be given to us after this life to meet again in the old quarters, to play chess and drafts, to get up soon to answer the morning roll call, to fall in at the tap of the drum for drill and dress parade, and again to hastily don our war gear while the monotonous patter of the long roll summons to battle. Who knows but again the old flags, ragged and torn, snapping in the wind, may face each other and flutter, pursuing and pursued, while the cries of victory fill a summer day. And after the battle, then the slain and wounded will arise, and all will meet together under the 2 flags, all sound and well. And there will be talking and laughter and cheers, and all will say, did it not seem real? Was it not as in the old days?